Florida is easily one of the best states to be in if you're a fan of roller coasters. In Orlando alone, there are plenty of standouts. From Mako at SeaWorld Orlando to Velocicoaster at Islands of Adventure, Florida is home to some of the most elite coasters on the planet. Just an hour away from Orlando though is what I'd consider to be the coaster capital of Florida, Busch Gardens Tampa. This park now has 10 coasters, the most out of any park in the state, and each of them is incredibly different from one another. Having been on nearly all of them, including the newly opened Iron Gwazi, I think it's time to rank those 10 rides from worst to best. So this is my ranking of every roller coaster at Busch Gardens Tampa. Number 10, Sand Serpent. The more I think about it, the more this ride being at the bottom makes sense. It's more intense than the next entry on this list, sure, but I wouldn't call it better, especially considering its downsides. If I had to describe this ride in one word, it'd be janky. This mock ride's Wild Mouse feels like it's barely hanging on, although that seems to be a common trait among these rides. If you're someone who enjoys janky coasters with strong laterals, maybe this ride is for you. But for me, I think the discomfort of it really ruins any potential fun. Not only that, but the way they run this coaster makes the lines get way longer than they should be. Wild Mouse coasters are meant to have multiple cars on the track at all times to boost capacity, which is especially important considering the cars can only fit 4 people in them. However, I don't think I've ever seen more than one on the track during my visits, which makes the wait balloon up to far more than it should be. Bad operations are pretty common throughout the park, but it's especially bad here because of the poor capacity this ride offers. That's not necessarily a knock against the ride itself, more so another reason why this ride should be gone as soon as possible. Hopefully they end up replacing it with a much needed new flat ride. Number 9, Air Grover. This is the only coaster at the park I haven't been on, and I hope it's clear why. I generally only do these kiddie coasters when I have an excuse to, and with Busch Gardens being a more crowded park, it just feels awkward to hop in line for this. So I didn't. Unlike with Sand Serpent, I think this ride at least justifies its placement in the park. Still, from what I can see, it looks like a fairly standard kiddie coaster that I doubt I would have ranked any higher even if I did ride it. Number 8, Scorpion. Only a few steps away from Sand Serpent sits an infinitely better ride in Scorpion. This is a short but intense Schwarzkopf looping coaster that consists of a drop, a loop, and 2 helixes. I think this would be a perfect ride for someone trying to get over their fear of inversions, but it's a great ride for everyone else too. This coaster packs a surprising punch with strong positive Gs, so it's well worth your time in my opinion. It isn't a standout by any means, but still a fantastic addition to their lineup. Number 7, Cobras Curse. This is one of my favorite family coasters, primarily because of how unique it is. Rather than being a more standard spinning coaster, Cobras Curse locks itself both forwards and backwards before hitting its free spin section. This allows for a ton of different thrills, and the drops and turns that this ride traverses are surprisingly fun, even if you're an enthusiast. The theming isn't quite as great as some people say in my opinion, but it's certainly better than any other ride at this park. Like with Sand Serpent, this ride does have a bit of a capacity problem, but in this case I think the ride itself more than makes up for it. This ride is a great addition to the park, even if it has more of a family focus. Number 6, Shikra. Dive coasters get a bit of a bad rap in the coaster community, and I think this ride is a key example why. Where this ride excels are the drops, which provides abundant airtime wherever you're sitting. However, other than the positive Gs going into the first inversion, Shikra doesn't do a whole lot else. It mostly feels like it's wandering, and I don't think the splashdown really makes up for that. Like with many other dive coasters, it just doesn't feel like a complete layout, which is why it ranks so low for me on this list. There are some good ones out there, but in my opinion, Shikra is just a bit above mediocre. Number 5, Tigress. These Premier Ride Skyrocket 2 models are extremely underrated. Yes, they're meant to be cloned in small plots of land, but that doesn't make them any less intense. The launches are wild, jolting you both forwards and backwards up the vertical track. Once you get up the track though, the intensity doesn't end. On my recent ride, I got an intense pop of ejector airtime upon reaching the top, and following that with the hang time filled inversion 150 feet up in the air is absolutely wild. Past that, the ride has some heavily trimmed drops and intense positive Gs, so it definitely peaks at the top. Regardless, I think this is a fantastic ride with plenty of variety and intensity. I only wish these rides were cloned as much as the 40 free spins were. Number 4, Cheetah Hunt. Like with the dive coasters, I think Cheetah Hunt also gets a pretty bad rap among most enthusiasts. There's a small sector that absolutely adores this ride, but I fall somewhat in between. While it's much less intense than Tigress, I think there's a lot this ride excels at that pushes it above that ride. That's purely the experience of rushing through this beautiful landscape low to the ground. There is the occasional moment of intensity, like the pops of airtime or the single inversion, but mostly this ride is pretty chill. I can see why some call it a family coaster, although I think I'd put it just slightly above that. This is a very strange ride for that reason, but I can understand why some love it. The speed and surroundings are great, and the periodic airtime throughout makes this one of the better rides in the park, even if the lines get way too long. Number 3. Kumba. This B&M sit-down looper is well known for its intensity, particularly because of how fast it runs. That reputation is well earned, as this ride absolutely tears through its layout. From the interlocking corkscrews to my favorite element, the 0G roll, each of the 7 inversions give you plenty of positive Gs. The environment only helps this ride, being surrounded in a lush and beautiful jungle. Even so, I wouldn't call this ride the most intense at this park, let alone the most intense B&M. That honor would go to number 2, Montu. This ride feels like how Kumba would run if it was twice as fast. Montu's in the running for the most intense coaster I've ever been on, with sustained positive G-force on so many elements. In fact, the forces are so crushing that I was told by an operator that I can only lap it twice before having to get off. This is easily the best B&M invert I've been on, with a non-stop intense layout that leaves you breathless when you hit the brake run. There is no other ride quite like Montu, even if it doesn't hold the crown at this park anymore. Number 1. Iron Gwazi. I've had my fair share of takes about this ride, so I'd like to take a second to make a formal apology. This ride is absolutely incredible, and in the running for my number 1 spot overall. On second thought, I think the 0G stall is the only dead spot on this ride, and although the death roll doesn't quite hit the heights of the Mosasaurus roll-on Velocicoaster, that's an extremely high bar to clear. Not only does this have the intense ejector airtime that RMCs are known for, but it also has moments with crushing positives. This is the only coaster I've been on by Rocky Mountain Construction that makes me gray out every time I ride it. Not even Steel Vengeance does that. There's not a whole lot more I could ask from this ride. Some may argue it feels a bit short, but I'd disagree. I think this ride lasts just as long as it needs to without overstaying its welcome, which isn't something I can say about some other RMCs. In my opinion, this is one of, if not the best coaster in Florida, let alone the entire United States. I can't wait to see what Rocky Mountain Construction gets up to next, because the future is looking bright. And that's the list. What do you think of my rankings? What would you change? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, be sure to like and subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.